This demo is all about different tones that you can have with facial features. And we will be talking a little bit about the concept of drawing face, but this is not the drawing demo. This is all about just using the watercolor and the different tones that you can mix in oranges and browns and light creams that will make up different types of faces. And I'd like to explore that in 4 different images so that you get a chance to try it out without feeling totally overwhelmed. These are 4 faces that we're going to do. We have a mid-tone brown, we have a sallow complexion, we have a pale complexion, and we have an olive complexion. And we're going to have fun, as you can see in these different colors, mixing the colors. Today we're going to be working on portraiture, and the first image that we're going to do is what they call a tan sallow complexion of an older individual. And what I want you to do is just first trace out the image, make sure that his forehead is higher, because I may have put his forehead a little lower. I had to redraw this a little higher. And all I want you to do is put water onto the paper. Right now you can see a little bit of a different color because I had something on my brush. But don't worry about that, just put water over the entire area. I'm just going to take this out. This is something that Alright. And in this particular complexion, we're going to be using Alizarin Crimson and yellow ochre. And in order to have you see what that looks like, let me clear my palette area here. Clean my brush up so you can see how to mix them. Okay, so first one is the Alizarin Crimson right there, and the yellow ochre is down here. So that's very red. We want to get more yellow ochre in there. And some of the best ways to do that, to get that color, is just to spray it if it's too dry. So there's our color, and then you can see here I have a bit of a test page. Now it's quite on the reddish side, but because we wet it, we can push it around a bit. So we're going to start where the darkest areas are. Go right into the glasses, don't worry about the glasses. And if we've been talking about the colors that we're going to use in this particular face, it's Alizarin Crimson and yellow ochre. And what I did was I wet everything first, and then I started to apply the color that I mixed, which is this color, into the darker parts of the face, and then just let it ride up. So the idea being that this is going to be where the darkest parts of the face are, and there's some lights just around the edge of the glasses. It gets dark into the glasses, around the nose here, and down a little further here on the chin. And by wetting everything ahead of time, what the idea is, you're trying to keep some of the whites that you see, which are up above here in the forehead, because again, this is the whole idea. Yes, you get the whites through when you're actually painting, but you also want to try and keep the whites of the paper if you can. And I'm noticing there's some really good whites and lights in there, so let's just do that. Just soften it up and let the color just transition out. A little bit more color here by the eyebrows, and let's soften that up. But he's got quite a bit of shadow underneath his nose here as well, so let's add a little extra color in there. A little more color by the left side of his face, and a little bit around his nose. And then he really gets dark in here, so that we could add a little bit more if we want to of that. Just pop in a little bit more Alizarin Crimson and some more yellow ochre. Try and make a big enough mix that you're not going to have to keep reapplying. So here we go. We're adding in more of that shadow here. And you see, I have now applied quite some darks in some of these areas, and I want to show you when you wet your brush and dry it off so there's no color on there. If this is damp enough, you can actually come in and you can push the paint around a bit. And that's what you want to do, because you want some darks in certain areas here, but you don't want it dark all over. And you want to be able to add in a little bit more color in some of the areas to get some of those depth of his face too. But you also want to be able to soften it so it doesn't look like it looks right now, that it's really dark in one area and really light in the other. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to keep adding a little bit here and there where I feel that I need to get some darks in. But this is only using just the two colors mixed together and the wet, and trying to just place. I've been having some problems with my recording process, so I'm going to quickly go over, even though we saw bits and pieces of this already ahead of this, of what I'm filming right now. I'm just going to recap. So in this tan and sallow complexion, I took Alizarin Crimson and yellow ochre and created this skin tone. I have this picture of this older individual, and I have wet the entire page, including his glasses. And then I applied this color starting from where the darks were on his cheeks over here, and then pushed up the paint and tried to push it around as it was wet to lift in some of the areas that I wanted to. Now this is fairly dry, not completely dry. I'm going to try and add a little light here. Oh, that's not so great. Let's try and see if I can do it this way. Okay. So what I have right now is I have some edges that I'm not particularly happy with. I'm taking a 6 brush right now and I'm re-wetting everything. Because what will happen, it'll soften some of those edges as well, and I can come back in. I don't want it overly wet because I can see it buckling right now. But the idea is I don't want to have a lot of these particular areas where they're just a bit too edgy for me. I'm trying to just soften up those bases here because I've layered it once or twice already as I was doing the first couple of recordings. My disc wasn't working very well on the video recorder. Okay, so I think you can spray it too. I never thought. I just want to keep it wet only in the area of the actual face. Now, one of the things with portraiture that is really important is that you try and keep it as transparent as possible, and that means not layering it too much, because as you get more layers on, you have the more edges that appear, and you start to lose the transparency of the light coming through or being able to push that area around where you want it to be nice and light, or even white for that matter. Now, I didn't really leave any white area. I just kept it very light in terms of some of the wash, and I'm just trying to get his nose a little bit less fine edge there. And the same thing here, just a little less fine edge around this area. Okay, and I'll show you how to try and bring in some darks and then still soften it. Alright. I'm also trying to figure out how to get the lamp to stay so you get better coverage of light without too much appearing on the screen. Let's try that. So hopefully it'll just stay. It's not going to give you a lot, but it's giving you some shadow here I'm not too happy about right now. Let's try some other lighting situations here to aid. I was getting reflection on the camera. Yeah, see there's the blinds. That's not going to work either. Okay, let's try and work with what we've got here. I will zoom out a bit too. Maybe that'll help. Oh, other way. Oh. Okay, need to lift it up a bit. So let's just leave it like that. He's all wet, okay? I have the color here beside me, right here. And really all we need to do now is add a little bit darker up here, right his temple. He has definitely some more reflection from the glasses that come down here and below here. And you can even use a smaller brush if you want to. I'm just remixing some more color. The biggest thing is the yellow ochre is hard to gauge exactly how much you need for that. Okay, he's looking really good there. He's got enough tan there where the glasses come down, but he needs a little bit more here. Now it doesn't look as red as that. It looks like there's a little bit more of another shade in there, which would be very easily made with a little bit of Phthalo Blue, just getting it to neutralize down a bit so it's not quite so red. And I'll show you that in a bit. What I'm going to do though is get it darker in his mouth here. I've just goofed there, so let's take a bit of tissue, dab it out, and then come back into where I want it. If it's not too wet. If it's too wet, that's going to creep out there. So I'm going to be careful. Now, here's the dark that I had softened up under his nose. So now I'm going back and I'm trying to add some of that dark, especially around just the area of his nasal area here, just below his glasses. And I can actually go in a bit with the glasses too, to get some darks there, and even a bit here. And then he's got some shadow down here too. Watch here, I just noticed there's some light pieces right in that side, so we'll try and keep that. He's got some eyebrow here. There's a bit of dark around this area here. And he's got some nice dark coming down here, but it's a little too wet right now to get anything of that in. He's got some more dark right in here. And I love the fact that he has so many great lines in here to work with that you could get really detailed. But in our process here, we don't want to worry about too many of the fine details. We just want to get a feel for how to soften, for how to use the colors to mix that particular type of skin tone. And we'll come in with a few little bits here and there so that you can get a feel for it. You're also thinking in terms of the forehead curving around. And some of those curves you have a little darker area, but you're also trying to think of the sun coming in and where is that, so that, for example, here I've lost some of that nice white that I should have because it's been spreading out, so let's try and lift that a bit. And all I'm doing is drying my brush in my tissue. I should show you like this, lifting this up and then drying the brush, so that you actually get some of that nice color back, or lighten this back. Here is a bit dark. You can try and soften that a bit. That's good. It's even a little darker underneath here. I could add just a bit more dark just underneath. And it's actually a little darker here. So I could just bring it a little bit more there. And that's pretty good. Now we could just slightly push this around a bit. And it's also good to watch, what I'm noticing is the fact that we have bits of dark just around the glass edge, or the sunglasses. And you could easily come in with what we're going to do with the gray afterwards to pop this in. But we want to let it dry for a moment, and I just noticed that some of my paint and water went out of the line here, so I'll just take some water and try and lift just this little part with my tissue. Not that it's going to make a big difference at this moment, because we're just testing out these paints. Okay, so I could go in now with a smaller brush, and I've got a 1 Winsor here. Here it is right here. Depending on how wet it is. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because if you take, for highlights, green is a really good highlight. A Viridian is actually really good. And Viridian is just a mixture of a little bit of yellow and phthalo blue. And I'm just looking for my Viridian in my pack here so you can see what Viridian looks like. So that's a Viridian. And Viridian is good for doing highlights. So if we use just a little bit in here, because it becomes a neutral because it's the opposite color on the color wheel, that we can get some darks in here by using this first. So we're going to take just a little Viridian. Like I say, you can mix it with by using phthalo blue and a little bit of yellow, Hansa yellow. And I'm going to bring it here a bit too. And I'm just going to let it basically soak in. Okay, because you can see it changing already. And I'm now going to do the same thing down here in the mouth, right around the edge here. I caught him midstream talking, it looks like. I actually took a group of people that I saw that I really found interesting. They must have been a tour group. And he looks like he was giving, they were all eating ice creams, and he was just standing with his travel information and talking to them. So I think I caught him in midstream sentence there. So let's add a little bit now around the side here. There's some nice shadows in there. And then down here too. Here underneath his lip. And get some of that nice wrinkle into the side of his face. There's a bit of dark between him and the shirt. And we can just shadow it up a bit there. Okay, now we're not going to use the green for the glasses, but I'm going to show you how we are going to use. I'm just going to darken this area. Oh, that's too much water and not enough green. Watch here, because I see a little bit of reflective light right underneath the glass there. Now, because I have so much color here, I don't know that I can lift a little bit. It doesn't look like I can lift a lot. But in this case, what I could do, because it's wet, or it's become quite wet because of what I've been doing, I can actually go in with my titanium white and just pop a little in there just to get a bit of that reflection right in there. I could do the same up here, except right now there's no, it's not wet. So we'll see what happens if I just touch that in those areas. Okay. So now let's go back to adding a little bit more green. I find this a bit too, I need to, oh, there's my picture gone. Let's bring the picture back up. I need to soften this a bit. And does it come right up? I've got the bit of nose here. I could do a little bit more shadow here and underneath. And also this part coming down here by his mouth as well. So now we're starting to get, there's a little bit of dark reflection just on his lip. A few more here on his chin. And even here a bit. Not enough water, not enough color. Right around here a bit. Okay, and then let's add a little bit into his furrowed brow, even into his eyebrows, and his eyebrows on the other side there. And there's a little bit down here. We could add just a bit in here. Oh, right on the other side where the glasses are. On this side we can do some right along here. Maybe even a bit on his nose, because the nose comes out here a bit. Okay. Now, one of the things I will do first is I'll take some Alizarin Crimson directly. I'll add a little bit of that green to it just to gray it up a bit, and I'm going to take it across here because it's not quite a, maybe a little bit more red. It's not really red, it's more of a toned down, because that looks really red there. So let's take that out and I'll show you better color. So again, taking some of the Alizarin Crimson, I'll just show you here, and now taking the Viridian green and dropping it in and neutralizing it more. So it's almost kind of a magenta. Okay, so here we go. Put a little bit in here. It's not all completely dark there. So, but where it is dark is right along the lip edge. Here on the side. Now if I came back in with a little bit more Viridian, we're going to get a definitely more of a gray. I just have to be careful that it's not too wet, because what happens is then it's just going to spread around as opposed to being that specific color that I want right along the edge. May have to wait for it to dry a bit more. Okay, so but that's the idea, that we're going to go in with a little bit more of that mixture of the Alizarin Crimson and the Viridian, and just get some nice little features in here. Not too dark, not too much. We can get some of that shadow in. And I'm just going to take a bit of my water on my brush just to even it out, so it's not quite so, it's more subtle. More subtle in here. Oops, too much. Okay, just adding a little bit more so that we can put it on this side. And you might want to actually pre-wet some of these areas, because it looks like mine are all drying. Now if I wet it now and just go in and soften it up, I can do that. But you might prefer to actually pre-wet it and then drop these colors in so that they spread out a bit better and they're a little dark on the edges. Let's just try and pop some of that in. I'm going to go with a little bit more gray tone there and pop that in. Just take your time. That to me is a bit red, and it actually goes up a bit. He's not just, it's a little bit more up. He's got a bit of a break there and then up. Oops, maybe too far. And then of course, just underneath there, where his lip is, but it's actually his tongue is just underneath there. I'm trying to get that part a little darker. Okay, so let's come back in and just add a little bit more of these highlights in there. A little bit more down here, just over here. That nice V shape. Some extra shadow in there. And now we're starting to see his face come to life a bit more. Okay, let's bring in a little bit here. Just going to take some water and start to let that cover there. And I'll take my bigger brush and take a little bit more of the grayish color and just going to pop it into down here a bit more. All right. Now we could use the mixture that we've created with the Viridian and Alizarin, or we can just go straight into a Payne's gray, which is what I'm going to do the glosses, because it'll get darker much faster that way. Now basically up here, you can almost do just the gray up here as well for his, add a little bit of, I'll show you how to add a little bit of the dark later so that you can get a better crisp glass. But I'm just going to start with watching the light just on the side there and then filling it in, pushing it around a bit because there's some lighter areas. It's dark against the nose, but we may not be able to really do that easily. I may not have brought the glasses out just enough. And now let's go over here to the other side and actually fill in the glass over here. There's a bit of light over there, and then it just comes over. Oh, we get the nose piece too. And now let's add some dark color there. Let's try and get the glasses the same evenness. They kind of come up there like that. It's spreading a bit because I've made it a bit wet. Okay, let's get that line there just before that other connected piece around there. Okay, and we will darken this in a bit. We'll let that just sit and play for a minute because it's a bit too wet. Now we can use that same gray for his hair and just pop in a little bit of that kind of gray area around here. You could even take a little bit of that alizarin mixture and pop that in there to add in some of that colorish feature, and then come back in with a little bit of that gray. And now he's got some hair, and you could do a few really dark areas in there eventually. Just to, I wouldn't bother with the brown because this is working. We just want a feeling for that kind of that area. And what are we going to do here? We're not quite getting his shadow of his jawline. So I'll have to wait for a bit for it to dry. It's too wet on my scale there. And I noticed that this got escaped a bit too. So this is too damp at the moment, so I'm going to take a break for a minute, dry it with a hairdryer, and come back in now and finish up a few little details, like just a little bit here around, but I can't do it. It's just too wet and it won't take it. So this will be our first image that we're going to complete. Okay, I've dried it a bit. It's still a bit lumpy, but it's a lot drier. And what I like to do is I'd like to add a little bit more yellow ochre mix first before I go back to my original, like the grayish tinge that I started doing, because I want to get a little bit more of that color in here. Don't be afraid to use the color, just don't lose the nice lights that you've got, right? You want to have a feeling that he's in the sun and that he's got part of him being shadowed here. And I noticed I didn't get much of the color or enough color around his nose area. There is some reflection of his yellow shirt too, and I'll show you how to pick up on that a little bit too. Just want to capture a little bit more of this down the nose here. It's a little bit more here on the side, here on this side of the mouth, under here a bit. Even here a bit, I didn't just pick up on that. Okay. Just up in here a bit. I see a little bit in there. Okay. So now let's go back to my small brush and I'll pick up those nice little bits of highlights and darks that we need for the glasses. So here we just have to watch the glasses come back a bit, and so you can see the bit of the top part of the glass. His eyebrows are kind of very limited there, behind there. So now we're just going to try and get some of that shadow that goes along the edge, and even try and capture just a little bit of where his eye would be in there. There's some shadow on his actual cheek from the glass, and then this part of the glass comes back here and is much darker and then kind of fades in and out. Okay, and so now on the other side, same thing. We need to get that darkness there, and then that glass continues and it kind of curves around. It comes down here. You see that edge there, definitely against that part, and then it just kind of covers that way, a bit there. Let's darken that up a bit. So now he's got a little bit more, and he's got some creases in. I don't know if it's just the creasing of the forehead, I'm not sure. And then we have to highlight a little bit of this armband, and then this back side here of the handle of the glasses. Okay, and so then let's just add some of that nice dark right in here under his lip. Comes up, and then this underneath there, and right in here in the corner, and then just down a bit. So that helps. And then if you want to go that dark, you can. You don't have to, because again, you want to be careful that you don't go over dark and then it becomes unrealistic. You almost be better just to use a darker skin tone as opposed to going into the grays. And then I've just realized I wanted to add a little bit of that color down where his neck was. I'm just going to bring it in. It's a bit darker down there, just so you can see kind of, it was really dark over here and not so dark right around this area. Okay. And so there should be a bit darker in there. Now, when I mentioned the yellow, you could just take a little Hansa yellow, and I noticed it just in there, and I noticed it just a bit around here, maybe even up here a bit. And then what I did was I just took a little bit of it, because there's that shirt there, and I just popped in a bit of his shirt, just to kind of get that reflection coming off. Actually, it's in his nose a bit too. And there's a little bit more just up here for his eyebrow area. And you can play with that. You don't have to make that so dark. That's a bit dark too. Could put it around there a bit. Alright, so that's our first guy. I did notice that there's a bit darker here. I could push that over a bit, and a little bit more here. Just even with a little bit of alizarin, if you want to. And then let it dry out. That looks like a bit too much. See, the alizarin is quite nice for the darkening up underneath the nose and stuff too. I don't know that you'd really want to use alizarin up here, but it could just get that brownish tone for maybe some of his eyelashes. Just play around a bit to make it so that you feel comfortable that you've got some of those nice expression lines. And just a little bit more maybe in the nose. Just comes down a bit here, even over here a bit. Maybe even just a bit in here too. Okay, so that's our first guy. We'll take a break. Okay, so this is our mid-brown complexion, and what I like about this gentleman that I took a picture of when I was in Puerto Rico is he was very intent on his basket weaving, and I just love some of the features that he had, including his rings and his piercings. So what I found is you can use burnt orange, Quinacridone burnt orange, and I'm just putting that right here. And we've pretty much got the color. We don't even need to mix anything. So the first thing we'll do is just basically go over the entire area of the face in water. And the only thing I'm probably going to do is add just a little bit of Alizarin Crimson. There's the Alizarin Crimson for his lips a bit. And then I will be using a little bit of Ultramarine Blue to mix into the orange to get a kind of a dark brown. So let me show you how that's done. So there is the burnt orange. I've got a little bit of the Ultramarine Blue in there. And there we go. Now we're getting into a nice, and we can use that for the eyelashes and for the hair. Okay, rather than having to go to, so I'll just put that in there too. Rather than having to go to a really dark gray, I don't want to have to use that too much. We'll use a little bit of Viridian again, just to highlight a little bit of some of the areas before, oh, that's cobalt turquoise, I don't want that. Here's my Viridian. Okay, so let's do this. Just taking a nice mix. I'm again looking for the darks so that I can start applying it in the dark areas, and then from there pushing it around and lightening it up. So you notice his nose is quite light. His eye is quite dark. The lips are quite dark. Up above the lip it's just not as dark, but there's quite a lot dark underneath there. You can bring it down. Forehead, he's got some light parts as well. And I'll just take it right into the hair. Okay, so now we're just going to start getting some of those nice darks in there. And then we're going to have to let it dry a bit. So you see above the cheekbone he's got some really nice lights there, and it comes down in darker here and here. And then it's quite dark in the back area here. I'd say in this case the sun was coming just kind of not too much, more on the top of his head than actually on his face because he was looking down. But I do see a bit lighter area there. I'm going to darken this a bit. Okay, and there, light. Definitely light up in this, just up in this area here. I can just dab that out with my tissue. We're not going to bother putting his ear in, but his ear would be a little lighter there too. Okay. I definitely want it darker here. Across there, coming down the front of the forehead and around by the eye. The eyelid is a little lighter. Let's try and get that right around there, right into here. Okay. So now we have to let it dry a bit. Now I do see somehow a watermark showed up here, so let's just get that fixed. I'm just going to give him a bit of a shoulder here. Now if you notice his shoulder's quite light compared to his face, so let's just lighten that up a bit. And then now we have a bit of comparison for how dark it should be. Starting to dry a bit, which is great. I see a bit of a band of dark color over in just this area and then up above here. Definitely around the eyebrow and around the outside of the eye. And what you can do, if you want a little bit, we can add a little bit of Alizarin Crimson in here, just to, oh, that's way too much. If you want to get it a little darker, a little bit more of a cherry tone. Back here. And around here a bit. You kind of have to let it dry now. Okay, I just want to leave a little bit more light here. Up there. And this is where his ear is, so I just want to make sure I've got that. And his chin is definitely darker right down below here, so let's see if I can pull that in. Okay, we'll need to dry that before we do. And it looks like I didn't notice he's got a bit of a beard down here too, so we'll add in a little bit of that just on this edge around here. Okay, I'll take a pause, and I have dried this, and you can already see that now it's not looking as rough as it did. The one thing I forgot to mention is that you don't have to have Quinacridone burnt orange to create that similar color. You could use burnt sienna. And so the burnt sienna, you just have to make sure you've got enough of it. And there, look at that. You see, that's just a little darker in some ways than, and in actual fact, you could easily use that on the lips and stuff, or underneath the lip. So that is another great color for a mid-tone. And you can always come in by adding a little bit of yellow in there to get some cools and stuff if you need to. Let me show you with the Hansa yellow light. If you needed to bring in some cools, just to get some recess in that area, you could just pop it in a little bit. And it doesn't even have to be that dark, actually. That's quite dark. Drop that in, get that in, just to get some of that depth, because it'll recede a little bit in there. And then just layer it with our other colors that we have. Now his chin is definitely more dimpled in here underneath his lips, and the lips come down even a little further. So I'm just going to show you, because you see his lip here, but then there's actually, he extends a little bit, and he's got it, you can see the dimple in there. So I'm going to go back in with my burnt orange and start working on that area here. And then it means that we're going to be bringing in some other color as well to get the depth that we need in here. I'm going to re-wet the whole thing, because I'm not happy of how this is looking here. It's looking too disjointed. Okay. And now I'm going to come back in. I'm just going to lift a little bit because I see the color later here and then up here. And I see more color in that area, so I'm just going to pick up some more color. Pop it in here. going up towards the ear. Trying to pick up that cheekbone. And then it extends out this way. And then we'll get some of those shadows in here. Okay. Now we can come in. I used a little bit of ultramarine blue as well in this to get the darks, right? So here's the ultramarine blue now, depending on how wet. No, it's quite dry actually. So let's try and first just bring in that bit of eye that we want here. His actual eye is underneath here. He's looking down and in. And then you have the eyelashes coming out. It's a little too wet for that at the moment. And then of course his brow comes across with his eyelashes around here and then about here too. A little bit up there. And you could take a little bit with his, there's a bit of a mustache or a shadow anyways. There. Right underneath his nose. And then that's where the other part of the shadow is, just under that part of that lip. Okay. So I'm going to take a little bit of the Alizarin Crimson again with the Viridian, and I'm going to gray that up a bit because I want a little bit here by his lips. That may be too much. And I like it just underneath because it's actually, I don't know why it's puddling there. It's probably from the mustache. Let's just try and let that sit there for a bit because it comes down there and we can even bring it in there a bit. Let's try bringing it around the eye a bit, above the eye a bit, over by the nose a bit, and then in that area here you need to get a little bit more of a red tone. Okay, not really happy about the way it's spread around here, but we can make it work. I'm going to have to go to a different brush. There's too much water on this one. It's not letting me do what I want to do. Okay, so I'm coming back with my one brush now, and I'm going to start trying to, and I'm going to have to dry this, let's see here, maybe not, maybe we can come in with that color and there'll be enough that I can get that bottom of the lip here, right in there, and that color actually comes right down here. And a little bit that way. And then that color comes down through the nose area a bit too. Just in there. Oh, that's too strong. Let's try and soften that out. Leaving me some residual problems here because I have some extra color on my paper. So going back in with the Alizarin Crimson, and then I want that Viridian in there to try and get that more of a muted tone. That's still too wet. Okay, let's try and bring it in just around here, because it kind of comes here and then comes down and fills in a bit of this area of the eye and around the other side of the eye here. And kind of comes down a bit around the eye. So, and then it kind of colors up right around about that nose area. So it comes down right into here too. Try if I can get that mustache back. That's disappeared quite a bit. Let's get it down the side too of the face here, over here. And you can see it underneath here too. Still too wet. There's even a little bit over here and up in here. This is definitely darker. I don't want so much of that. It's definitely lighter around the lip, definitely lighter up on the nose, definitely darker around this area. Okay, I'm coming back in again with the alizarin, trying to, still quite wet. Now I think I see a little bit more of facial hair just down here, whereas I thought it was just the indentation. Okay, starting to dry enough that I can get a little bit more. I'm going back to my neutral color with the alizarin and the Viridian, trying to get into more of a gray because I want to get back to that grayish mustache. Okay, here we go. So it's here, comes down there, just to the top of the lip, and then follows along here. And there's a little bit of that coloring just along here. I'm trying to get it to stay, it seems to be Still too wet. Gonna get a little bit redder in here. I made not quite enough of overbite there. Kind of comes up and over a bit more. So the lip actually is fuller in the side and then comes back up and it's fuller there and then comes down. And now I'm going to try and go for just a little bit less of a dark neutral, but that kind of magenta-y look, trying to pull in some of those lines here that I see. And let's try and get that same coloring, the edge of the nose around there, and then right on the back here. It's all melded in a lot more, so it's not as dark anymore. Let's go back and get a bit more burnt orange in there. Just going to take a bit of water because what I'm noticing is with the nose, there's some reflection here, and we got to get it back up. This keeps getting very elusive on me here. Same as that area here. Okay, so we've kind of got it. We need to try and darken it a bit just in there. We'll try and come back to that in a minute. And we're going to try and fix, using that gray that I've mixed with the Viridian and the Alizarin, we're going to try and bring that into now and do his brow and his eyelashes. Hopefully it's dry enough that we can kind of get that idea. Now the piercings, we're going to have to come in with some white titanium. Just get that a little bit more of a peak area here. Kind of comes down here a bit more there. Could even come in with just the Viridian itself to get that highlight there. Let's try and do that just around the edge there. And then it kind of tapers off. So now let's try and get that eye back here, where that shadow. It's definitely darker down here. Bring that eye up there a bit. Now he's got some beautiful lashes. So I have to try and get that a little bit more dark on that side. I think it's still too wet to get those lashes in. They actually curl under because you can see a little bit up here and up there and then down. And even a little bit more of that curl there. Try and get that feel for that eye coming down here. Darkening up into there. I don't know what that is. I think that's paint. Okay, so we've got that far. Still can't get quite that. Let's try with a little bit of green. There we go. Now we're getting it. A little bit more green underneath here. Pretty good there. Does flow down a bit more down here. There is a little bit more fuzz around here. A little bit more shadow. And then it actually comes down here with that same coloring. Just kind of fuzzy around the base here. Now he has a shirt part there. I'm just going to quickly take some. This is one of those things, you don't have to do this because this is just more of kind of a reference. So there's his, and I'm going to get a little darker in there. And then this, I'm just going to add a little bit of blue in there. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing with his hair. And take some of that ultramarine blue. I've got a different brush here. Just going to pop it up here. And I'm going to go in with that green and alizarin and then put it on top. Oh, okay. Trying to get it dark enough. There we go. Make it more interesting. Some of it's turning a bit purple. Some of it's staying a bit redder. How do I do that? Go in with a little bit more Viridian because it's a great accent color. It's a bit too strong on its own, but it can really help. Get what we want. Now, see, there's the ear here, but I don't want to really do a whole bunch with it. Okay, back to here. Let's get a little bit more of that color in there. And let's try and get that eye working here. Okay, that's good. There's a bit more dark underneath the lip. And in here a bit more. And it just creeps down through here. Even maybe a bit up here. Kind of gets dark just in there. And a bit more under his lip here, where his beard kind of pops out. Okay, now the one thing we don't have yet, we don't have enough of a definition just here. There's more definition just on the nose there. Even here a bit. I get a little bit of that. Just a bit of the change there. And let's get rid of that. I'm not really interested in even, worrying about the ear. It's just getting the right coloring there. What I would do is I would actually go in now with my green and then just do a bit of eyelash. If I can. I mean, I still think it's too wet. There's a bit darker in there. A little bit more in that nose area. A bit darker in that part of the lip. Okay, and so I mentioned to you about, okay, there's a little bit of a lightness here for his hair. I didn't quite capture that hair straight across there like it needs to be. And straight up. Let's add a little dark to it. Now we need definitely the green or the ultramarine blue just to pop in there a bit. I'm using the Viridian green just to kind of get that feel for that movement of hair he's got there. Okay, so now we've got those little piercings. So I'm going into the titanium white and trying to add that a bit in there. Just above here. And then the lip just down here. We'll see how that dries and see if we need to do anything more with that. I notice his eyebrow, I'm not getting it enough across here. And we could make the skin darker. Let me just put in a little bit more burnt orange. We don't want to lose the light, but then again we also don't want to take that opportunity not to really show that beautiful skin tone that he has. Okay, I think we've captured his essence of what he's doing, although I've lost my two. Don't ask me how I lost those two. They just may have disappeared in there when I popped the color over. Okay. So I would leave that and let that dry, and you can always soften it up a bit if you wanted to. Just comparing it to the other guy here. Yeah, definitely need to wait and let it just dry, and then we can come in and soften up a bit of this area here. Alright, so that's the first two. And now we'll get into our children and their colors. So I just have to be able to focus on this person first. So let's get her picture here. Where's her picture? There's our little girl. This is fun because it is basically our two primary colors that we are using, which is the permanent rose. There's our permanent rose. And our Hansa yellow. Our Hansa yellow there. And this is a really light complexion, so we're just going to be mixing a little bit of each of those. I'm looking for a mixing area. So let me just clean out this one tray here. Actually, I'll clean up both. Oops. Okay, so we've got both gone. Click that off. Each time I do this, I'm just looking at the previous one that I painted of him. I keep looking and going, is it going to turn out the same or is it going to be different? We'll see. Alright, so coming back to our girl. So with this very light skin complexion, pale complexion, you just take a little bit of the yellow and a little bit of the red, and you're going to get a nice complexion color, and you're going to just wet her whole face, and even the hat. Just go right in there and just go right in all the way across. No, I don't believe there was any skin there. It was just strictly this whole area. And so what happens is if you just do the whole thing first, now I happen to have, it looks like a little too much, should be not quite that brown. So there's something in my brush here, so let's change brushes and put in a little bit more of the permanent. I want a bit more, that's it, a bit more of the pinkish tone on her. Okay, and so that's all you have to do, and you're looking at just lifting a little bit away from, oh, we've got a little too much here. So she's got light coming on top here, light coming on the top there. There's shadow just under the hat, the shadow just under her eye, and there's a little bit of light around her cheek here, just in this area. She's looking out onto a parade. That's how I found her. And so there's just some lights in there. Just going to go back to her image that I did. And because it was a parade in middle of November, it's quite cool out. And so all I'm going to do now is just pop in a little bit more of the permanent rose for her hat. Start getting some of that just for the fun, to get some color in there. And then we're going to put some shadow underneath her, but she needs a little bit of pink on her nose. Pink just under her eyes, pink just on the other side of the cheek, here a little bit, and of course on the lips. And then it carries back here a bit. Okay, so we kind of have to let that dry. Just going to soften that up a bit. And we could even put just a wee bit more flesh tone just here. It's not picking up very much. There we are. Maybe a little bit more in just there. And I'm going to lift a little bit from this area here. Okay, and we just have to basically wait. So while we're waiting, what I can do, because the hat's wet, we need to put a little bit more Hansa yellow into that red to get that cherry red for the hat. So I'm just mixing it up here, and then just going to pop it in where those shadows were. It's a bit not red enough. It's too hard. There we go. I'm just going to clean that off a bit. And hopefully my hat won't decide to creep down into the coloring there. Okay, Now her skin tone is so light. I don't know what I've just done here. That her lips are really light, and so we can just take a little bit more of that coloring and put it in there. It seems to be traveling, so I'm going to have to wait. Okay, we're going to have to let that dry a bit because I can't get anything to sit. It's all moving around here. I'm just going to get a little darker back there where her hair is. So we'll have to wait for that. Now the other thing is that we can, let's see, anything I can do? No, I can't do a darn thing until I wait. It's just moving around too much. Okay, so we just have to take a break. We were working on our pale complexion, and this is all dried now, so there's very little we need to do. But I do want to show you a difference between two different papers. This paper is much whiter than this paper. This is a Bees product. They call, let me just see here, they call it oh, this is a Strathmore, okay, 140-pound cold press, visual journal, and then this one is Arches paper, 140-pound. So it's quite interesting to see how it can change the look of the face completely. This is definitely darker than this one, and you can see right away. So sometimes it's better to get whiter paper depending on what kind of complexion you want. So one of the things that we haven't done yet, and going back to the image, here we go. So it's just that her eyes and her lips need to be dealt with, and I'm going to use, again, the permanent rose because that's what we've been using in this image. And so I'm just going to take some of the permanent rose here, and just, it's very light, so that's quite strong. So let's soften that up. And the reason I have a couple of lines on here is because this part of her lip was a little bit darker around this area, and then it tapered off, and this part of the lip came down here like this. I've actually got it too far over there, and this part of the lip was a little darker as well, just a little bit here and a little bit on the side. So all we have to do is just soften those up a bit to get that looking like we wanted to. It could actually be a little longer here too. So let me just water that down, lift that a bit, and we'll just rework that a bit, just a little bit on the top there. And a tiny bit here. Oh, careful. Okay, and then just on the inside of the nose here, we'll just soften that up a bit and color that a bit. Take a bit more. A little bit on her tip of her nose. Just give it a little bit more depth there. It does curl down here a little bit. Just a bit of a shadow just in there. Okay, and now let's work on, I've put, her neck actually comes up here a bit more. I've put her hair just here. So let's take a little bit of, what did I say I was going to use for her hair? I used a mix of permanent rose and I believe a blue. Okay, maybe a cobalt. Let's try that. So let me clean this up here and just put in a little bit of that permanent rose and a little bit of cobalt. Let's see what comes out. Oh, we're getting more purple. Not what I wanted. Okay, so now let's try a little Viridian. That should turn it gray. We don't want that either. So, I know I used a little Viridian for sure, just to kind of give me some dark highlights here. So let's mark down the Viridian. This is just the hair on the side, it kind of comes down. And to neutralize that, we can go to, what do we want to use? The yellow will just green it up. The red will neutralize it. So let's go back to the red and see what we get. That's too dark. So let's take a little bit of Hansa yellow and see what we can come up with here. Because if we use all three colors, our Hansa yellow, our Phthalo Blue, and our permanent rose, we will get a brown. Here's our kind of brown. Let's put it a little bit more blue in. And then a little bit more yellow. Let's try that. There we go. And it's just loose, so you don't really have to worry about, we're not putting an ear or anything in there, just, but what we do have to do, and I haven't done, is put a little bit of shadow in there. So that purple that I had actually made out of the Viridian, the cobalt blue, I'm just going to pop in a little shadow here. Now that seems quite dark, so let's soften that up a bit. Just with a little bit of water. Okay, don't think I'll be able to remove that. And so now what I would do is I want to get a little bit darker. So I'm going to take a little bit more Viridian and a little bit more of the permanent rose to get a darker gray. And I'm just going to very carefully drop it in there. And hopefully it'll diffuse a bit. And then the next thing would be to do the eye. Now, you can't really see where the iris is versus the actual eye, unfortunately. So I'm going to use the color of the, but it's actually white on the side here. And the eye continues over right over here. So let's see if I can use a little bit of titanium. Pop it in just over here a bit. That may be too much. Just carefully pop it in. Okay, and she has some beautiful eyelashes, so we need to bring in. And you know, even that little bit of color that I have there, I could use just a little bit on her mouth at the edges a bit. Here too. And even around her nose a bit, just to give her a little bit of shadow in there. Although you don't really see it on my image there. And then we could do the eyelashes here with that same color. We'll darken them afterwards. She has a bit of an eye in there, but you don't really see it because it's kind of been shadowed down. Let's bring a little bit more color with a little bit of green into her eye here. Let's see if we can get a little bit more neutral in there. Don't really see the pupil. I'm gonna just try and get a little darker there. It seems to be a bit more dark just on the side here, where I just before I put the white. That may have gone a little too brown. A little too round. Her eye isn't quite as wide as that. Let's lift that up a bit and push it over a bit. I'll have to let that dry. Okay, so I'm just going to use a little bit of gray, Payne's gray, instead of having to worry about, it's a little too wet there. Let's just put a few eyelashes there. Now it's not even going to work. So there's my gray for the eyelashes. And you could just see just a little bit underneath here. This is still too wet. We'll try and put that little bit of a line on the edge there and see what happens. I don't think it's going to work. Because if I put the eyelash in, it's just taking away any of that white that I had there. So just be patient and put it in afterwards. Give yourself some time. There is a bit of shadow in here too, a little bit more. Okay. I'm going to soften that up a bit. Just taking the brush and pulling it down a bit here. Right on the side of the nose. Give it a little more depth. And if we can be patient enough just to let it wait. Oh, no, that's really dark. It's nice, but it's a bit dark. So I would pop in just a bit more here if that was going to be the case. Just get that hint there. That her other eyes there. And make sure that it's just a little bit more of the eyelash. The eyelashes come a bit there. Okay. It's still too wet here to get some of those eyelashes on top here. And we can put a little bit of dark in the side here, just to give it a bit of... Now, the only other thing I would do at this point is I did put a little bit of dark, and it was actually part of that purple, just for a bit of shadow underneath here. Just to give something of a variation for her shirt there. So I just used permanent rose and a little bit of cobalt blue, and I don't think I marked that down here, so I will do that. And then just try and get that just a little bit in there to give it a bit of interest. Again, we're looking at the skin color, so we don't really need to worry about this extra shadowing underneath here, but if you want to, you can add just something to make it look a little bit more depth. There will be a little bit more shadow on this side, just because I can see it there. Okay, and there's maybe even a little bit more shadow in there. Now, the only other thing I could do is to add a little bit more of my permanent rose, just to pop in a bit of the variation on her braid if you wanted to, on the hat, to give it a bit of an interest. There was a little bit more color just along here. And if I wanted to fix that, like I said, here, let's see if we can get a little bit more white in there. I don't know how wet it is. Let's try. I would put a little bit more dark in that later, but not now. Just to leave it like that. Okay, so there's our little girl. Having done that now, I think I got a little, is that splash of white there? I don't know. Okay, so we've got her done. Do I see any other shadow that I want to pick up there? Not really, that's enough. There is a little bit more shadow on that side that I could do. But you always want to make sure it's on the cooler side, so let's just pop in a bit more here. Just so that it goes back. Okay, so our final one is our young boy, and he's got more of an olive complexion, and doesn't have much of a face there to worry about. So we're going to do a bit of his hair, and the biggest thing about this guy, let's find his picture here, is that we want his teeth not to be white, but he's looking down, and so he's got a bit of more of a shadow on one angle. I'm going to try and find a picture here. Here he is. Okay, so I'm trying to push that over here so that you can see without too much of reflection coming off of the light here. And what we're going to do is wet his face first. And his neck. And his ear. Okay. And I'm just looking to see what combination of colors I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using Quin Gold. I thought that you would find this interesting because we do have the Quin Gold, and so why not try it out? Because it already has a bit of that yellowish tan to it, which will help with the complexion. So we're going to do the Quin Gold there. And with the Quin Gold, I use the Permanent Rose. So let's pop in a bit of Permanent Rose there. And now I'm going to mix those two together somewhere on my palette here. Let's clean something off here. Okay. So having wet everything, we don't need a lot of Quin Gold to actually, because this is already, like I say, more beige than some of it. So let's pop in a bit of the Quin Gold right in. We're going to pop the Permanent Rose over top. And then we're just going to look at the different parts of the face and see what we need to do to darken, lighten, move it around. So I think it needs a little bit more Quin. So let's pop a little bit more Quin in there. And we're looking to keep this area, see the lights are there, and the lights are a bit there, but everything else is quite dark. Okay. So again, you can lift to try and keep some of those light areas. and then come back in and try and work with those two colors here, because it's definitely, there's some more darks and nice colors in here and up in here along his face. Not just watch that cheek area, definitely down below his nose here, around the eye, around the lips. Okay, and so let's add a little bit of permanent rose. Oh, that's way too dark. So let's just lift it a bit and add some mixing here. And it could come up into his hair a bit. And what I see here is just a little bit around his shirt on this side. Change his color a bit there, under his chin a bit more. Watch his teeth, because his teeth are actually kind of beigey, and underneath here. So I could just pre-mix a bit again, and try not to get too much in there. A little bit more permanent rose. Okay, so let's try and move that around a bit, soften it up, because we do want some of that right in here in the eye area, but it's not too wet, nothing staying. So we're going to have to let that dry before we can actually get it to work a bit more, because I would like to get a little bit more of that same color, probably with a little bit of green just in these little areas in here to darken and intense it a bit, and then eventually start working on the eyes. And in this case, for the hair, I decided that a really good color would actually be the Shadow Violet, which is really interesting because I never thought of using it for hair. So there's the Shadow Violet, and if you take a little bit of the burnt orange or even the Quin Gold in there, we get this lovely kind of brown mixture, which is fantastic. So I would go first with the Quin Gold into the hair just to get some of his highlights that he's got. And then go into the Shadow Violet, and just mix a little bit together, those two colors. And then suddenly you've got really nice, if you want more darks, just add a little dark in there, but look at that. There we've got his hair. He's got this dark area right in here that kind of comes across, and we can play with that a little bit more later, just with a few highlights. I'll just make sure the color's all covered there. Some of these streaks would be nice to be lifted. Okay, so now getting drier, but still too... Oop, that was something I had on my finger. That wasn't good. Okay, so let's go back in and clean my brush. And try a little bit to get some dark in here. Now I've extended his shirt a lot more than where it is on the picture. So I'm going to just drop in a little bit of Quin Gold and Permanent Rose here. See if I can grab some of that nice color just underneath here. Now we're going to soften it out, because he's definitely got more of that color texture behind there, but it just disappears this way. So then I would just pop in a little bit more of that up here, because that's the color we want in here too, and down below here a bit. Remembering that we want to keep this light. A little bit on his cheeks, definitely over here in his cheeks and just there. It's too wet there, you can see it's lifting. Just going to push that right underneath so it just fades right into that bottom of his neck. That same color should go on the eye, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get it because, well, maybe. Let's see. It's a bit dark there. It kind of transitions into his eyebrow. Same over here. And he's got a little bit more of the nose there coming down into that area. He's got quite dark over here too in the ear. And we can golden it up a bit with the Quin. What I want to do is, I've got that light coming through here, but it could definitely be a little lighter just at the top there. Here, I would say this is okay. Alright, so we have to wait for it to dry. And what can I do? Can I do anything with the lips? Maybe. Let's take the small brush. In his case, we can use the permanent rose again. And then if you watch carefully, he's got more of the darkness around just the base of the lip here that comes around. And then the upper lip is very light. And where it's darker is inside the mouth. So again, a bit of darkness in there. Through here until it hits the tooth, where the teeth are right there. And it's darker just down below there. So now we're trying to get that lightness that's on the top here. So we want it to blend a bit and still keep his teeth there. A little bit darker in there. It's a bit shadowy in here. See if I can soften that up. And that color still comes up in here a bit too. Okay, so now let's just go in. When we were using the Viridian, and I have marked the Viridian here. I'm going to use that to darken up. You could use this same color here too. I just have to get some more water on my brush. See how wet it is, and maybe too wet. Let's just see. Yeah, this is going right away, and it's just hitting everything and taking over. So I can't do that. How about his eyes? That eye's too wet. Let's try it with the other eye. So I'm going to go back with a little bit of that same dark. And I'm going to start working on just a little bit of his eyebrow. Let's bring that in. And then down here, his eye is actually, you don't see a lot. There's just a little bit in there, and it curves around. But you see a little bit of the eyelid and a little bit under the eye. And then some nice lashes. So now to make that dark, would be using Viridian and a little bit of the permanent rose to get a gray. Okay, let's try that. Right in there. Seems a bit brown still. And I'd say it's more purplish just underneath there. Maybe a little bit more on the reddy. Let's have a look. I just wiped my brush a little bit so that I would have a little more control of the color. And see if I do that there. See if I can get it in here now too. And up. And then it's nice and dark around here. Let's try and get that same color in. Okay, a bit of that color can go right under his nose. Kind of comes there. There's a little bit of a gap there. And you see it on the other side of the nose there. And a little bit here. Eventually, when this dries a bit more, we can put it in there. And I'm just looking at his chin now. His chin comes just down below here. And then there's some dark right in there. Okay, so we're getting there, only I'm going to take some ultramarine blue. Let me put that down here, ultramarine blue. And just going to dry that a bit and see if I can darken this up a bit. Just around here a bit and here a bit. Yeah, I'm going to have to go with the gray. If it's dry enough, I'll go straight to the gray. There we go. And then a little bit of the eyelashes. Over here too. Just feathering it and then letting it, we can lighten it up a bit. Not lighten it up that much, but soften it up a bit. So it's looking more natural. Added a bit into there. His other eyebrow was a little bit higher there. Because we haven't got any of the other darks on his hair yet, it's looking a little bit over dark. Let's just add a little bit of green in there. Let's put that Viridian. Oh, it's looking gray. There must be some red in there somewhere. That's a bit dark. Okay, so let us now work on some of these other shadows here that we haven't really developed. So let's bring a bit more shadow in here. And under here, up here, and over here. And let's soften that up a bit. Okay, let's reduce that just a bit so we can see if we're getting what we want. Just a little too far out there. It comes up here and here, and then cheek goes up more by his eye. I've gone too far out. So we need to get rid of this. Don't think I'm going to be able to get rid of it enough. I do have another type of scraping brush. It might just work to lift it off a bit. But we're going to have to wait for a bit and let it dry before I go any further there. Okay, so let's try coming back and doing a little bit more over here. I'm adding in a little bit of green, and I'm going to try and get some of that tone up here. And then soften it. And try and do the same back here a bit. Oops. Let's go back up. There you are. Too dark. Let's pink that up a bit. And green that up a bit. Okay. I came up with just a bit too much there, so let's go back. He's looking very greeny in this. Let's try and fix that up a bit, and I think if we bring in some of the dark hair, that'll help to create a bit of a, there we go. Okay, and just a few highlights if we can get them in there. Maybe even a bit here and around here. Okay, so now it helps us with eventually getting those eyes right, but this is too wet right now here. I can see how wet it is. And this is fairly wet too. We're going to have to either wait, yeah, I would say we'll have to wait, or dry with a hairdryer a bit. Because we want that, see that color there? We want that in here with the chin a bit too. So let's pick up some of that color with the green and the red. And try and just get that little bit of shadow underneath there. Soften it up. There's a bit of white just underneath the lip. Okay, and if we can get that same color just a bit in here. Soften it up here too. Okay. I'll come back in here with a little bit more of that red. Got to orange it up a bit. There we go. think it's affecting the fact that I put too much paint over here too. So let's try and clear that up there. Wait for that to dry. So more pink, a little bit more pink in here. And you could even bring that up just a bit up above here. If you don't have it too wet, I'm not getting enough water control on the brush. Let's try and do that again. Okay, that's looking very pinkish, so let's try and get some of that quin back in there. Up into here a bit more. That's too much. Okay, so now I can see a little bit of the color in here. Right in there, just by here, and then just in here a bit more. So I'm just going to soften that up around there, come through here, around the nose. A little bit of green. Okay, back again with the red. Alright, let's try and take some of that permanent rose and just get to that magenta level with the Viridian, not going all the way to the gray. And let's come back in here again. Trying to get that clean line in here. Almost. It's darker at the top. Right up there at the top there. And then just a little bit there. So I'm going to get a little bit more green in there. And very carefully try and just get the right amount. I'm finding that the brush is not holding its point very well. Too much water and too little pigment. I've got to keep rolling it and then dabbing it. So I like to get a little darker here. I'm going to go back to my Payne's Gray and I'll mark that down just underneath here. Oh, you can't see that. And what I'm trying to do is just again get that point just where the eye is here. Soften this up a bit, and I want to get a little bit more of the other color in there. There we go. You want to capture all these wonderful expressions with the sides of the mouth and stuff, but still being able to keep the lights. Problem is you don't want it to be completely different from the actual photograph. As you try and get the shadow right. His sideburn comes down to just a bit more there. And then I'll bring in some of those darks again. And it was pretty light. It just came down a bit over here. Closer to just the edge of his face, it gives a nice and it helps to get the coloring there a little bit more. This is way too wet here to do anything more down here. And same with this. It's really picked up a lot of moisture on this side, which really surprises me. Okay, so now I'm going to, that red underneath here is a bit too strong. I'm just going to soften it out now. That's better. So we have good, this could actually just taper out just a bit more here, I see. I didn't get enough coming across here and over. Could even come in a bit more under this kind of there. That's better. And I do see that his, ooh, careful, too much dark. Right on underneath his forehead there, right in here, I don't have enough coming up. I've got too much light here compared to the light is really just in this area. So let's see if I can add a bit of that. Probably going to mix too much with his hair. And as you can see, I went out there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to add a little bit of purple, which is just a little bit of the permanent rose with a little bit of ultramarine blue. That's a bit magenta-y, but that'll do. I just want to grab and make that shirt a little closer to him. And then bring that up here too. Let's just see where it goes. If I could get a little more of that color in here, that would be great. Even a little bit into his ear. And even a little bit in here would be wonderful. Okay. Well, that gives you a bit of an idea. We've got some of the shadows. We've got some of the shadows on the outside of the eye. We've got some of the shadows on here. We've got some of the lights. This should have been maybe a little darker. But it gives you 4 different color schemes in terms of the faces we've got. And we'll let them dry completely, and then we'll have a look at them again just to see if we need to soften or highlight a little bit more. And those are our 4 faces to test out.